Well, I give thanks to the Muslim Debate Initiative for setting up this debate and everyone for coming out. And thanks, Sammy, for that opening statement. I wish I believed a lot of that. I wish I did. And just to clarify my position here at the beginning, you do have people out there who say Muhammad is the worst person in history, and on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have people who say Muhammad is the best person in history. I believe the truth lies somewhere in between, as it often does. And just to give you my overall position ahead of time, I like Muhammad for about the first 40 years or so of his life, and for the next 10 or 12 years, okay with most of his actions and so on. And then the last 10 years kind of ruin everything for me. I've debated the prophethood of Muhammad several times. I can say that Sammy is the best I've ever faced on this topic. We debated the prophethood of Muhammad once before. So I'm sure he'll be able to give responses to everything I'm about to say. Whether those responses are satisfying or not, that's a different matter. But as I'm about to share some information about Muhammad and the role and the model he set, don't be too worried until you hear the responses, and then if you think Sammy's responses aren't very good, then you can start being worried. I'd like to focus on a couple issues at first, and one would be, if we're talking about the role model set by Muhammad, think about the role model set by Muhammad in terms of how we deal with problems. For almost every problem that the Muslim community had to deal with once Muhammad became the model for society. And keep in mind, during the early Muslim community, during the Meccan years, during some of the Medinan period, Muhammad is not the role model for society. We see Muhammad becoming the standard of society very late in Islamic history, and we see the impact that this had. Let's look at a few teachings from the Quran and the Hadith. Once Muhammad was the role model for society. Surah 929, fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth from among the people of the book, that's Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. This verse doesn't say, fight people who are attacking you. That was earlier. That was an earlier period in Islamic history. This says, fight those who do not believe. This is a command to fight the unbelievers. And if you'd like to know the justification for fighting the Christians and the Jews and subjugating them, occurs in the next verse. What's the justification for fighting them? Surah 9:30, and the Jews say, Ezra is the son of Allah. And the Christians say, the Messiah is the son of Allah. These are the words of their mouths. They imitate the saying of those who disbelieved before. May Allah destroy them, how they are turned away. Sammy talks about bigotry and racism being a problem for society. But you can have bigotry in the sense of violence towards other people. I mean, the kind of violent bigotry against other religions. And the Quran, right here, as plain as day, commands Muslims to fight those who do not believe in Allah. Is that a good role model for society? We have Christians and Muslims in this room, probably some who don't fall into either category. Is it a good role model if we say one group is going to fight and violently subjugate the others because of their beliefs? I don't think that would be a good role model. If you're in doubt about what Muhammad meant there, in these passages commanding to fight people based on their beliefs, I'll quote a couple of hadith. Sahih al-Bukhari, number 6924, Allah's Messenger said, I have been ordered to fight the people till they say, La ilaha illallah. And whoever said, La ilaha illallah, Allah will save his property and life from me. So your property and your life are safe from Muhammad if you recite the Shahada. In Sahih Muslim, number 30, Muhammad said, I have been commanded to fight against people until when? Until they stop attacking you, until they are no longer aggressors against you? No, I've been commanded to fight against people so long as they do not declare that there is no God but Allah. Over and over again, fight people based on what they believe. And if you want to say Muhammad meant something different, he meant you should get along with everyone, or he meant you just fight in self-defense, wow. The Quran claims to be clear, and Muhammad is supposed to speak clearly. If he's going around and he means fight in self-defense, but he's saying fight those who do not believe, and you're only safe if you believe what I believe and you recite the Shahada, well, that matters. That's relevant to what we believe about Muhammad. On the issue of apostates, some of you are Muslims in this room. What happens if you become a Christian? Well, in the West, nothing will happen to you. Nothing will happen to you if you become a Christian or an atheist or something else. But if we adopt Muhammad as the role model for society, as Sami believes, then the rules will have to change. Sahih al-Bukhari, number 6922, Allah's Messenger said, whoever changed his Islamic religion, then kill him. If you leave Islam, you have to die. If that's not clear enough, Sahih al-Bukhari, 6878, Allah's Messenger said, the blood of a Muslim who confesses, La ilaha illallah, and that I am the Messenger of Allah, cannot be shed except in 3 cases. Life for life, so you killed another Muslim, a married person who commits illegal sexual intercourse, so adultery, and the one who turns renegade from Islam, apostate, and leaves the group of Muslims. So the only way you can kill another Muslim is if he does one of those things. Notice one of them is killing apostates. Sami quotes Surah 532 of the Quran to show how peaceful Islam is. He said, well, in Islam, if you kill someone, it's as if you killed all mankind. Now here, Muslims quoting this quite a bit. Let's read it in context and see what the verse actually says, and we'll read the following verse. Interestingly, the verse Sami quoted is, according to the Quran, a teaching of the Jews, and it actually comes from Mishnah Sanhedrin in the Talmud. But let's read what it actually says, 532, and then we'll go to 533. For this reason did we prescribe to the children of Israel, it's a teaching of the children of Israel, for this reason did we prescribe to the children of Israel that whoever slays a soul, unless it be for manslaughter or for mischief in the land, and read the Muslim commentaries, mischief in the land is violating any of the Jewish law, it is as though he slew all men. And whoever keeps it alive, it is as though he kept alive all men. And certainly our apostles came to them with clear arguments, but even after that, many of them certainly act extravagantly in the land. That's a teaching of the Jews. The next verse says, and here's the teaching of the Muslims. The punishment of those who wage war against Allah and His apostle and strive to make mischief in the land. What's the penalty for making mischief in the land, in a Muslim land? Is only this, that they should be murdered or crucified, or their hands and their feet should be cut off on opposite sides, or they should be imprisoned. This shall be as a disgrace for them in this world, and in the hereafter they shall have a grievous chastisement. Now notice what many people do when they quote this. There's a teaching of the Jews. They chop off that part about this being for the children of Israel. They pretend that this is a directive towards Muslims. They ignore the next verse, which commands Muslims to violently kill and chop off body parts of people who make mischief in a Muslim land. Well, how do you make mischief in a Muslim land? Apostasy, preaching a non-Muslim message, that all falls into the mischief category. The most extreme, of course, would be having a non-Muslim military presence in a Muslim country. But think about this, the penalty for making mischief in a Muslim land. Is the United States making mischief in Muslim lands? Most Muslims would say so. Yes, Afghanistan and Iraq and so on. The United States is making mischief in Muslim lands. What's the penalty? It's not pretty, not pretty. So, be careful how you quote the Quran, because sometimes the next verse teaches something very different. So just to kind of get an overview there, what's the solution in Islam if you have unbelievers in a Muslim country? Well, you have to subjugate them. You have to violently subjugate them if they're Christians and Jews until they are paying tribute and until they feel themselves subdued. And that's for Christians and Jews. We're the people of the book. We have a higher status. If you're a polytheist or something, it's worse. You have to convert or die, or you have to get out very quickly. Someone leaves Islam, you kill them. And you can go on down the line with this. What's the penalty for, if you steal something, it's not some juvenile correction center. It's not going and doing community service or short jail term. You are going to lose some limbs on this one. You're going to have your hand chopped off if you steal. If your wife keeps getting out of line, what do? Well, you warn her first, then you banish her to a separate bed, and then you beat her. Over and over again, when there are problems, for Muhammad, the solution involves violence. So is that a good role model for society? How are we going to deal with our problems in the world today? Well, it's got to involve some bloodshed or some beating. This is not me. This is Muhammad talking. This is the Quran. Now, There are certainly other issues, but the two main categories that would concern me, again, there are plenty of others, but the two main issues that would concern me as a non-Muslim if we were to adopt Muhammad as a role model. One, we have the violence, the tendency towards violence as a solution for various problems. And two, the issues involving women and Muhammad's family. Sammy pointed out that a strong family leads to a strong society, and I absolutely agree 100%. Once the family unit starts breaking down, I can guarantee you society will start breaking down. The question is, should Muhammad serve as the role model for a successful family? Well, let's think about this. According to the Quran, Surah 4:3, Muslims can have up to 4 wives. How many wives did Muhammad have? He had at least 9. He had at least 9 or 11 at one time, according to Bukhari. So why did he get 9 or 11 wives? Well, the Quran gave him a special revelation, Surah 33, verse 50. No, he had 9. Muhammad had, according to Bukhari and according to Tabari and other sources, Muhammad had at least 9 wives at one time. And the justification, and Sammy will explain this, the justification is Surah 33:50, which gave Muhammad, and Muhammad alone, special privileges, namely the right to have more wives than everyone else. Now, if we think about some of these wives, and trust me, Sammy will have responses for all of this. One of them is a girl named Aisha. This is, to Westerners, this is probably one of the things that bothers them most about Muhammad. So it's good to raise the objection and allow Muslim apologists to deal with it. Aisha was 6 when the marriage contract was put together, and she was 9 when the marriage was consummated. Now, in any Western country, at least now, you have different rules in the past, but at least now we would look at that and say a 9-year-old girl is not ready for sex, and we would make laws, and there are laws against having sex with girls that young. You have to, the laws can vary by country, but generally we would agree that's too young for a girl to be entering into marriage. But if we take Muhammad as the role model for society, we have to say, when did Muhammad think it was okay for a girl to start having a family and having sex? Well, 9 at the latest. So should we adopt him as a role model for society? Well, if we agree with that, and I certainly don't. Muhammad had a wife named Sauda. Muhammad married, there's a dispute whether he married Aisha or Sauda first after Khadija. But Sauda became old and unattractive after several years of marriage. Aisha said she was a fat, huge lady. That's a quote from Aisha. And Muhammad was going to divorce her. And Sauda actually had to go to Muhammad and say, I will set aside my marital privileges of you coming and visiting, sharing your time among all your wives and sharing time with me. I will give that privilege to Aisha, so you no longer have to come visit me, you can just spend more time with Aisha if you don't divorce me. And Muhammad agreed to that. It's in the Quran. And the Quran actually praises Sauda for making that agreement, for saying, I will set aside some of my marital rights and give them to Aisha, so you can spend more time with Aisha if you don't divorce me, because I've gotten old and unattractive. Is that a good role model for society? You live with a woman you marry a woman, she gets older, she gets unattractive, and well, no problem, I'll just toss her to the side. Oh well, she's willing to stay married to me if she gives up her rights, maybe I'll stay married to her. Is that a good role model? Is that a strong family? You Muslim ladies in the audience, would you like your husband to have that attitude? Once you get older, once you get unattractive, he tosses you to the side, and the only way to make an agreement is to give up some of your marital rights. Is that the kind of role model you want? I wouldn't consider that a good role model for society. Sammy brings up the importance of honesty. And it's interesting that in the Muslim sources, if you make an oath and then you find something better than keeping your oath, you can set aside your oath. So I made an oath, this is what I'm going to do. And then, well, I decided something is better, and you can then break that oath. And interestingly, we find Muhammad himself doing this. There's a verse of the Quran, beginning in verse 66. So the opening verses of verse 66 tell Muhammad, why did you forbid yourself what I haven't forbidden you? Why did you do that? And the historical background for this verse is that Muhammad was caught in the house of one of his wives, who was a slave girl, Mary the Copt. He was having sex with Mary the Copt in one of the houses of his other wives, Hafsa. And his wives got very upset about this, and he made an oath. I promise I'm going to stop having sex with Mary the Copt. Then the revelation came down. Muhammad, why are you forbidding for yourself what I haven't forbidden? And according to the opening verses of Surah 66, Muhammad no longer had to keep his oath. If you want commentaries on that, we can go, if you want to look at the historical background. Is that the kind of role model you want? Your husband comes to you, I promise you I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to be sleeping with that woman anymore. I'm not married to her, she's my slave girl. And then comes back to you a little later. Sorry, I just realized Allah didn't tell me I had to do that. And so it's okay for me not to keep my oath. Is that a good role model for society? I don't believe it is. The issue of mutta. Shia Muslims believe that mutta is still an acceptable practice. That's temporary marriage. There's a disagreement among Sunnis. Sunnis generally believe that the practice is no longer allowed, but it's important. It was not Muhammad who overruled the practice, who abolished the practice. It was the rightly guided caliphs. So if you believe that the rightly guided caliphs can overrule Muhammad's teachings, then you believe that mutta is no longer allowed. But regardless, everyone agrees, everyone, Sunnis and Shias agree, that at least at one time Muhammad allowed the practice of mutta, temporary marriage. In other words, straightforward prostitution is not allowed. I can't walk up to a woman and say, here's $50, let's go have sex, because you're not married to her. So in the early Muslim community, there was the practice of temporary marriage. Namely, you walk up to a woman, here's $50, let's get married for tonight, and then we'll be divorced in the morning. There's no question this was allowed in the early Muslim community. We have tons of sources on this. And even Sunni sources in Bukhari and Muslim. And if you'd like to read them, bring it up in the Q&A. Or if someone would like me to read them, I'd be happy to do so. But the practice of mutta was allowed. Now, do we want that as a role model for society? That if you want to have sex with someone, you're away from home, your urges, you're dying to have sex, well, no problem. I'll go give a woman something. I'll go to someone and they'll pronounce a quick marriage, and then we get divorced the next day, I give her some money. If you're bothered by that, that's your profit. That's your profit. In other words, if you're bothered, hey, how dare this guy say this stuff in here? Then you're agreeing with me, actually. You're agreeing with me that Muhammad's not a good role model for society, that should not be allowed. So, what do we have here? Overall, and just to clarify again, I'm not saying everything Muhammad did was bad. I don't believe that. I believe Muhammad did have many good qualities, many qualities that could serve as a role model for society. But I would say that about pretty much anyone. I would say that about any one of you in here, you have certain qualities that would be good for other people to imitate, but you may have certain qualities, certain beliefs, certain actions that aren't good. And that's true of me, that's true of pretty much everyone in the world. When we look to Muhammad, it's not a pick and choose matter. You can't say, well, I like this about him, so therefore let's proclaim him the role model for society. According to the Quran, Surah 33:21, Muhammad is the role model. He is the pattern. So if Muhammad is the pattern, and you think that we should imitate him and society should model our behavior after him, you don't get to go through there and pick and choose and say, these are the things that I agree with, these are the things I like, these are the things that we should imitate in society. It's a package deal. So if you like the fact that Muhammad encouraged his followers to give to charity, great, I believe in giving to charity. But you don't get to stop at giving to charity. Muhammad also commanded his followers to kill apostates. He also commanded his followers fight the unbelievers. He also commanded his followers chop off the hands of thieves. He also commanded his followers to beat their wives if things get too out of hand. He also commanded his followers that they could have up to 4 wives, and in his case he could actually get more. And the example he set, he's the role model. You could have sex with a 9-year-old girl. You can abandon an older wife unless she comes up with a good deal for you. And if you want to have sex with a prostitute, just make sure you marry her for the night, or marry her for a week, or marry her for a month. That's the example set by Muhammad. And I'm out of time, but there's certainly much more we'll be discussing here, and I want to address some of Sammy's other claims. But I think we can say, based on these issues, that Muhammad may be a good role model in certain areas, but not certainly an overall good role model for society. Well, Sami, I'll just go through his points. Sami said that Surah 929 only referred to fighting some certain people who had killed messengers. Well, the killing of messengers was much, much earlier, and in the historical context, it had nothing to do with this command. I'll also point out that if this really means just kill a particular group who killed your messengers, it is horribly unclear. The Quran claims over and over and over again, like a beating drum, to be clear. It's clear, it's fully detailed, it's fully explained. Those are things the Quran says about itself. So if it had been revealed to Muhammad, fight people who had killed your messenger, why didn't it say, fight some people who killed your messenger? Why would it say, fight those who believe not in Allah? And why would the very next verse give the justification for the killing as, the Christians say that Jesus is the Son of God? Why would that be the justification? Why wouldn't it be? It's because they killed a messenger. In other words, if you're telling me this verse means something other than what it says, then you're telling me the Quran is a very, very unclear book. Now, the actual historical context, let's read it. This comes from Ibn Kathir. Allah Most High ordered the believers to prohibit the disbelievers from entering or coming near the sacred mosque. So polytheists were no longer allowed near the sacred mosque, but Mecca got a lot of money from the pilgrimage to Mecca. So people were worried how they were going to make money. Let's read. On that, Quraysh thought that they would reduce their profits from trade. Therefore, Allah Most High compensated them and ordered them to fight the people of the book until they embrace Islam or pay the jizya. And then we have the revelations. So in its context in the Quran, the only context that explains why this fighting occurred, why Muslims are commanded to fight the people of the book, is the very next verse, and it says, because of our beliefs, we have false beliefs. In the historical context, the justification is, we need money. Where are we going to get it? Oh, well, now we're going to fight these unbelievers, and they're going to pay us money. That's going to replace the money that we used to get from the pagans taking the pilgrimage. Nothing here about what Sami said. Sami said that the hadith, the numerous hadith, where Muhammad commands his followers to fight people until they recite the Shahada, he says, well, you know, that's in the context of war. Again, I would say Muhammad is very unclear in what he's saying. If he really means, let's go fight people in the context of war, why not say, let's fight people in the context of war? Why say, I'm going to go out and fight people until they recite the Shahada? And they're only going to be safe. People are only going to be safe for me if they do. He says this referred to pagan Arabs. Actually, I don't have a tremendous problem with that interpretation. If you say that the command for Jews and Christians is to fight them until they're subjugated, until they're dhimmis, and that the command for other groups, polytheists, is to fight them until they convert to Islam and embrace Islam, then I don't have a problem with that interpretation. He said killing apostates is only, the command to kill apostates was only issued because all of these apostates would go and turn against the Muslim community. Here again, I would say if that's what Muhammad meant, he is not communicating very clearly. If he meant fight an apostate if he attacks you, why would he say if anyone, not just a certain person, if anyone leaves his Islamic religion, then kill him? I mean, these are commands about killing people. You want to be as clear as possible. If the President of the United States were to issue a command and say, hey, go kill Muslims, everyone would object. Wait, what do you mean, go kill Muslims? We're just supposed to go around killing Muslims? And then suppose he came back and clarified and say, no, I just meant, you know, some terrorists who were blowing stuff up from Al-Qaeda. Wouldn't you say, look, if you mean terrorists who are working for Al-Qaeda, you need to say that. You need to say exactly what you mean if you're talking about killing people. That's the clarity we would demand. Why does Muhammad get to issue these blanket commands? If anyone leaves Islam, kill him. Oh, by the way, I really meant if he comes back and is starting to attack the Muslim community. Didn't say that. So if either way, you have two alternatives. Either Islam commands you to kill apostates, in which case, not a good role model, or Muhammad is not a very good communicator, in which case we should adopt a role model who speaks clearly and tells us how we should act. On the issue of women, Sammy says, well, the beating isn't supposed to cause a woman pain. It's not supposed to leave any bruises, not supposed to hurt them. And here, I'm not sure what Sammy, you do have Muslim commentators who say things like that, but if we look to the Muslim sources, we see something very different. Sahih Muslim, number 2127, Aisha sneaks out of the house to see what Muhammad's doing. Muhammad comes home, finds her out of breath, asks her what she's done, and then what happened? He struck me on the chest, which caused me pain. Wait a minute, this is Aisha saying what Muhammad did. He struck me on the chest, which caused me pain. I thought Sammy said it's not supposed to cause pain. So was Muhammad violating his own commands in Surah 434? Let's go with a more extreme example. Sahih al-Bukhari, number 4825. A woman had been beaten by her husband until a patch of her skin turned green. Aisha brings her to Muhammad for justice. Aisha brings her to Muhammad. Muhammad will protect this woman. And Aisha said, look at her. Her skin is greener than her clothes. Muhammad did a little investigation and said, wait a minute, you lied about your husband. Sent her away. So what is this? Keep in mind, she's lying about her husband, so she had done something wrong. But is Sammy's interpretation of 434 correct? You can't leave a mark, you can't cause pain. No, he beat her until her skin turned green, and that was okay because she was being a bad wife. So we need to keep in mind when we read the Quran, when we read these verses, we have lots of ahadith on these passages to explain what they mean for us. And in fact, if you'd like to know the historical background for Surah 434, we have that. A woman came up to Muhammad because her husband had slapped her in her face. The handprint was still there. And Muhammad was about to pronounce judgment in her favor. In other words, there was going to be some sort of retaliation. I don't know what that would have been. If she gets to slap him in the face, or her dad gets to come and just slap the taste out of this guy's mouth. I don't know. But then the revelation, Surah 434, comes down. And Muhammad said, after this verse, husbands can discipline their wives physically. Muhammad said, I wanted one thing, but Allah wanted another. In other words, I wanted to give you justice. I wanted to make sure this isn't going to happen again, but sorry, Allah said something else. Marrying extra wives. Sammy says, well, there were widows. That's true, there were widows. But I want to point out, if you say that Muhammad married these women because some of them were widows, Muhammad only increased the problem radically. Because the Quran issued a command, you cannot marry Muhammad's wives after he dies. So you take someone like Aisha, she's 9 years old when the marriage is consummated. She's 18 years old when Muhammad dies. Aisha spent the rest of her life as a widow because no one was allowed to marry Muhammad's wives. So all of these women were widows after Muhammad died. So if the point was to protect these women from being widows, I'd say it failed and only increased the problem. You ended up with a lot of widows who can never remarry. Sammy said Muhammad married the daughters of his close companions to strengthen his bond with them. Is this a good role model for society? That's the context of this debate. I have my friend Paul back there. Maybe Paul has a daughter a few years from now, and I say, Paul, we're good buddies. We need to strengthen our friendship. I'd like to marry your 6-year-old daughter. Is that a good role model for society? I don't think anyone in here would say that's a practice we need to adopt in our country. And yet, if we say Muhammad is the role model, Sammy said that's why he did it. I don't agree that that's why he did it, but if that's the justification for marrying Aisha, then is that the role model we want to follow? I would say no. Sammy pointed out that in the passages that we would normally turn to dealing with the Sauda issue, it doesn't say Muhammad went to her and said, I'm going to divorce you, and then they came up with a deal. I agree. It says Sauda feared. So if you want the justification for this passage, it doesn't say Muhammad ran out to divorce her. It said Sauda feared divorce. Muhammad wasn't treating her the same way anymore, apparently. But Sauda feared, this man is about to divorce me. So she goes to Muhammad and says, look, let's make a deal. Don't divorce me, and I'll give my marital rights and privileges of visitation to Aisha. Now, suppose we grant that Muhammad wasn't going to divorce her. Let's suppose Muhammad gave no indication that he was going to divorce Sauda. Suppose you have a wife and she comes to you and she thinks you're going to leave her. She thinks you're going to abandon her. and she says to you, please don't abandon me, I'll give my marital privileges to someone else, just please don't leave me, please don't take away my home, please don't take away my food. She says that to you. What's your response going to be? Good deal, I agree. Or, what do you mean? I will never abandon you. Why would I abandon you? You're my wife. I will take care of you until you die. Which one of those should we adopt as a role model for society? Where you are loyal to your wife until one of you dies? Or where your wife is so afraid that you're going to divorce her that when she comes to you with a deal, you say, good deal. According to Muhammad's example, if your wife is scared that you're going to abandon her, she comes to you with a deal, you should say, okay, cool, okay, good deal. Maybe I wasn't even going to divorce you, but now that you offered, yeah, I would like to spend more time with Aisha. If you don't like any of this, this is Muhammad. This is Muhammad. If you don't like any of these things, then what's that mean? It means you're agreeing with me that Muhammad is not a good role model. Sammy said, well, breaking oaths is okay if you agree to do something better. You know, I'm going to take you by car, well, maybe I take you by plane, that's better. That's not what Surah 61 says. It's not what it says. Where it says you don't have to do this because Allah didn't command it. This is Muhammad making an oath to his wives, I'm not going to continue sleeping with this slave girl Mary the Copt. I have 11 wives, 9 wives, something like that. I'm not going to continue sleeping with my slave girls. And then comes back, sorry, Allah didn't tell me that I was not allowed to sleep with the slave girl. I'm going to continue the practice. What's the better thing? What's the better thing that Muhammad is doing there? The only better thing that he's doing in the context would have to be he's sleeping with the slave girl instead of, that's better than what he made an oath to do. And I don't think that's a better example. Sammy said that temporary marriage was only for a time. So notice he agrees, and any Muslim scholar will agree that temporary marriage, paying a woman to marry you for the night, was allowed in early Islam. The only dispute would be whether it's still allowed today. And again, you'd have to believe that the rightly guided caliphs can overrule Muhammad. And some of the sources, even Sunni sources, would say no. But does that make it better? Keep in mind, Muhammad allowed the practice. Muhammad allowed the practice, and we're not asking, are the rightly guided caliphs a good role model? We're asking, is Muhammad a good role model? And Muhammad allowed mutta. So if you think it's a good role model, that's up to you. All right. Sammy, thank you for that, Sammy. Sammy said that mutta was allowed because the early converts to Islam were used to having lots of sex, and it would have been very difficult for them to just stop, and therefore Muhammad allowed them to continue practicing mutta. Well, are you telling me that this is the example? Because that would apply today, right? Lots of people in the West, in America, they're used to having lots of sex. So when they convert to Islam, do you give them a break because that's what they're used to? Do you say, hey, I know you're having lots of sex, so you can engage in mutta for a couple of years until you wind down, and then you have to be chaste. Is that what Islam teaches? Because according to what Sammy told us, and according to what we read in the Muslim sources, that's exactly what Muslims should teach. If we follow Muhammad as the pattern of society, then we should say, if you convert to Islam, you can practice temporary marriage, a form of prostitution that involves getting married for a day or two or something like that. You can engage in that. You can do that. That's the example set by Muhammad. So do you believe that's a good pattern for society? If you agree with Muhammad, you have to say yes. You have to say that's okay. Now, Sammy says that Muhammad was the one who outlawed the practice. Well, I disagree. According to the Muslim sources, and I have several more, but I'll just read a couple right here. Jabir Abdullah came to perform Umrah, and we came to his abode, and the people asked him about different things, and then they made mention of temporary marriage, whereupon he said, yes, we had been benefiting ourselves by temporary marriage during the lifetime of the Holy Prophet and during the time of Abu Bakr and Umar. So when did it end? So if we're following the timeline here, it was allowed during Muhammad's time, then allowed during Abu Bakr's time, and at least some practice of it during Umar's time. Next hadith, number 3249. This is not Muhammad talking, this is Muslims talking about history. We contracted temporary marriage, giving a handful of flour as a dower in the time of Muhammad. Notice what you would pay a woman for having this temporary marriage. You give her a handful of flour, of food. We contracted temporary marriage by giving a handful of flour during the lifetime of Allah's Messenger and during the time of Abu Bakr until Umar forbade it. Until Umar forbade it. So who outlawed mutta? Well, that's Umar. So I'll leave this up to you Muslims. If you believe in following the rightly guided caliphs of Sunni Islam, then you would have to say it's outlawed today. But if you don't believe the rightly guided caliphs can overrule Muhammad, you have to say it's still allowed. So what do we have here? At the very least, if we ask ourselves, is this a good role model for society, you have a decision to make. If you believe that's an okay practice, then you can say Muhammad is a good role model. If you say that people who convert to Islam, or people in general, should be chaste, even if they're used to having sex in the past, they need to stop doing that, then you're saying Muhammad is not a good role model for society, and you're agreeing with me. Sammy said that Sauda didn't have to fear being abandoned because she would have been compensated. Well, she certainly didn't want to be divorced for some reason, so she was going to be losing something. That wasn't the point. Whatever she was afraid of losing by being divorced by Muhammad, the correct response of Muhammad should have been, if he had no intentions of divorcing her, the correct response should have been, what are you talking about? I made a commitment to you. I'm never going to abandon you. That would have been a good role model for society. But saying, okay, I'm reducing your privileges because you've agreed to do that, I don't consider that a good role model. Sammy says that the issue of Aisha is okay because a girl has to be mentally and physically ready. Where do you get the idea that Aisha was mentally and physically ready? According to the Muslim sources, when she was taken to Muhammad's house, she was playing with a swing, and she took her dolls to Muhammad's house. I mean, that sounds like a normal 9-year-old little girl. Where do you get this idea that she was a young woman? Not from the Muslim sources. You get that from your own views today. And besides this, if you go to Surah 65, verse 4 of the Quran, you find very clearly that Muslims are allowed to marry prepubescent girls, and there's just no question that prepubescent girls are not ready for marriage. You're not ready for that. Medically, physically, you're not ready for marriage. You're not ready for sexual intercourse. You're not ready to start working on a family if your body has not reached the stage of puberty. Now, Surah 9:29, Sammy says, is a mandate to fight oppressors. Surah 9:29 is a mandate to fight oppressors. Well, remember, the Quran says over and over again, that the Quran is clear. Let's read it. I'll go ahead and read the entire context of the passage, and you're going to see what the problem is. You're going to see there's nothing in here about fighting oppressors, but don't take my word for it. Take the word of the Quran for it. So we'll read Surah 9, starting at verse 20, and we'll keep going, and you'll see the problem with Sammy's interpretation. Fight those who believe not in Allah. Tell me where the oppression occurs. Tell me where the oppression starts. Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden, which hath been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger. So if you don't forbid the same things that Islam forbids, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, if you do not acknowledge Islam, from among the people of the book, that's Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued, until they feel subjugated. Nothing about fight oppressors there. Fight people based on their beliefs, based on the things they allow, based on them not acknowledging Islam as the religion of truth. Next verse. The Jews call Ezra son of God, and the Christians call Christ the son of God. That is a saying from their mouth. In this they but imitate what the unbelievers of old used to say. Allah's curse be on them. How they are deluded away from the truth. Where's the part about these people oppressing the Muslims? Maybe it's in the next verse. They take their priests and their rabbis to be their lords in derogation of Allah. And they take as their Lord Christ, the son of Mary. Yet they were commanded to worship but one God. There is no God but He. Still complaining about their religious practices. Where is the part about these people being oppressors? Praise and glory to Him, far is He from having the partners they associate with Him. Maybe it's in the next verse. Fain would they extinguish Allah's light. Here we go. Maybe they're oppressing Muslims by extinguishing God's light, and extinguishing God's light refers to them attacking the Muslim community. Now let me finish the sentence and see what this actually says. Fain would they extinguish Allah's light with their mouths. This is talking about people speaking different religious beliefs than Muslims. They would extinguish Allah's light with their mouths, but Allah will not allow but that his light should be perfected, even though the unbelievers may detest it. Allah is not going to allow them to stop the truth from spreading. How's he going to stop them? Next verse. It is he who hath sent his messenger with guidance and the religion of truth to prevail it over all religion, even though the pagans may detest it. So the solution to what these people are saying is to send Islam and to make Islam superior to every other religion, to make it prevail over all other religions. How is Allah going to make Islam prevail? That's why we read Surah 9:29, fight those who do not believe in Allah. So where in the entire context of this passage do we read anything about fighting oppressors? There's not one word. There is a steady series of complaints. These people believe things that Muslims don't believe. They don't believe in the truth. They don't acknowledge the truth. They have religious practices that we forbid, and they're speaking a message that we disagree with. Those are all of the justifications for fighting. Where do you get the idea that this refers to oppressors? If you believe it refers to oppressors, you have to agree that the Quran is remarkably unclear. Sammy says, well, the Quran says if they stop fighting, you cease. That, well, if you want to go with that interpretation of it, it would depend on your interpretation of the word fitna. But I'll grant that. Surah 2, verse 193 says something along those lines. But guess what? Read the passages that talk about if people don't fight you, you don't fight them. Those were abrogated according to your own Muslim commentators. Muslims have a process of abrogation. Later commands abrogate or cancel earlier revelations. Surah 9 was the last major chapter revealed, and it commands Muslims to fight and subjugate non-Muslims, which would be the pattern if you agree with Muhammad. Sammy says, we don't need to clarify the killing of apostates because people would have understood that it only referred to killing people if they go start a war against you. Well, we need clarification, don't we? Isn't this a religion for all time? Isn't this, aren't we supposed to be able to read these teachings even today and understand what they mean? Over and over and over again, Muhammad says, if they leave Islam, chop their heads off. If they return to kufr, kill them. If that means kill people who go out and start a war against you, I really wish he would have said that. It could have saved lots of lives, and all four schools of Sunni jurisprudence would have concluded something very different from what they did conclude, and that they all concluded that if someone leaves Islam, they have to die. Right, I'm out of time, but I'll continue some of the other responses in the next rebuttal. All right, Sammy asks, he responded to my question about whether a person today would be given the kind of leeway that an early Muslim convert would be given. And he says maybe a little, but not the same kind of leeway the early Muslims were given. But I mean, think about that. Are we following the example of Muhammad? If we're following the example of Muhammad, then you do give them the same leeway. If you're not, if you're saying, no, we have different rules for Muslim converts today, then you're saying, well, we're not going to follow the pattern of Muhammad himself. Sammy said, well, maybe some people didn't know that Muhammad had forbade the practice of mutta and only found out later during the time of Umar. And you do find ahadith giving that position, but the point I'm trying to make is the ahadith are inconsistent. You have Muslims saying that it wasn't outlawed during the time of Muhammad. It wasn't outlawed. It was outlawed during the time of Umar, and the people who said it was outlawed during the time of Muhammad were followers of Umar who are trying to go back and say that this is what Muhammad taught. So you have the disagreement, and I don't really care if you want to say Muhammad did it versus Umar did it. You have sources that can back that up. But the point is, if you did want to say the practice still applies today, you could very easily say, well, these ahadith right here that say that Umar forbade it, I'm going to go with those. I'm going to go with those sources, and I don't believe rightly guided caliphs can overrule Muhammad's interpretations, so I get to practice it if I want it. So it's really up to you, because even in your Sahih narrations, your most reliable narrations, you find inconsistencies. Sammy again said Muhammad didn't want to divorce Sauda. I'm granting that for the sake of argument. I believe he did, but I'm granting almost everything he's saying for the sake of argument. Let's suppose Muhammad had no intention of ever divorcing Sauda. And let's suppose she was totally, utterly mistaken, and Muhammad was just going to be faithful to her forever and take care of her forever. This is the problem. Suppose all of that is true. Then when your wife somehow gets the wrong idea, she's mistaken, she comes to you and thinks you're going to leave her. If she was totally mistaken, why wouldn't you say that? Wouldn't a good role model say, again, you're mistaken? Why would you get that idea? Whatever I've done to give you the idea that I'm going to abandon you, I'm sorry, I will never do that. I will take care of you forever. Why wouldn't he have said that? Why would it be? Why would his response be, oh, you think I'm going to divorce you and you're willing to give me more time with Aisha and I don't have to take care of you in the same way? Okay, that's a good idea. And that's the response we find in the Quran, and the Quran puts its stamp of approval on that. Says, yes, Sauda was right for making that arrangement with Muhammad. Again, we're asking ourselves, is this a good role model? Sammy says Aisha was mentally ready for marriage, and how do we know? Because she became a scholar, and we do find in the sources, we find tons of narrations from Aisha. He said she led an army into battle. This was called it's called the Battle of the Camel because they rallied around Aisha's camel, and she led out an army against Ali. So those are true. And he says Aisha was, this very strong girl. And I'll grant here, when I read the hadith, the major hadith collections, Aisha is my favorite figure in there, mainly because she's always talking trash to everybody, and I find that, I don't know, I like people who do that. But Aisha is a great character, but I don't see how you get the idea that because decades down the road she led a battle, and because she had many stories that she passed on from Muhammad, that therefore when she was 9 years old she was ready for marriage. I don't see how there's the connection. Certainly later on Aisha was an influential figure, but I don't understand the connection. Now, Sammy says that 65 verse 4 refers to prearranged marriage. That's not what it refers. It refers to divorce rules. It refers to divorce proceedings. How are you going to divorce a woman? Because the objection arose earlier in the Quran. An earlier revelation had said, if you're going to divorce a woman, you wait a few months. You wait until she's gone through her cycle, and then you can divorce her if you know she's not pregnant. Well, the objection came, what about various kinds of women who don't have menstruation, either because they're too old or because they're too young? They haven't reached the age of puberty. And Surah 65 verse 4 is meant as a response to that. And it says, if a girl is too young, she hasn't reached the age of menses, and you're divorcing her, then you wait 3 months so that you can make sure she's not pregnant. Well, how is Sammy saying that this refers to a woman you haven't had sex with? According to the Quran, there is no waiting period if you haven't had sex with her. If you marry someone and you change your mind very quickly, and you haven't had sex with her, there is no waiting period. So if the Quran lays down a waiting period for divorcing this girl who has not reached the age of puberty, what does that mean? It means you've had sex with her, and it means the Quran allows sex with prepubescent girls. And read the commentaries. If you disagree with me, when you come down for the Q&A, say, David, give me the commentaries of Ibn Kathir and Ibn Abbas and Jalalain. Give me the commentaries. I promise you I will bring them up for you. Sammy says, I want to throw out Islamic methodology when I interpret Surah 929. How am I throwing out Islamic methodology? I read you the entire passage in context. So certainly part of Islamic methodology that you would want to read things in the context of the Quran. You don't take one verse out and leave out the surrounding verses. But I also went to the historical context in Ibn Kathir. And according to Ibn Kathir, this issue arose not because the Muslims were being attacked, but because they were wondering how they were going to get money. And at the end of the passage, it specifically says, based on this revelation, Muhammad went out to fight at the Battle of Tabuk, the expedition to Tabuk. And the Byzantines didn't even show up. They didn't show up to the battle because they didn't want to fight. So, based on 929, Muslims launched an offensive campaign against the Byzantines. This was not defensive. And Sammy said, well, even according to the passage, yes, the Byzantines wanted to extinguish the light of Islam. What did the passage actually say? They want to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths. This is talking about people speaking falsely about God. So even according to the little clip Sammy quoted, this is not talking about fighting aggressors, it's talking about fighting people who have false beliefs, who say false things, who have different practices from the ones Muslims have. And Sammy says, well, the Jews and Christians had a great time under Islam. Well, look, if Jews and Christians ever had a great time, I'm not saying, there have been periods of peace where Muslims and Christians and Jews have lived in harmony. When we have those periods in history, it's not because of Islam. It's not because of what Muhammad taught. What did Muhammad taught? They pay the jizya, you fight them until they feel themselves subdued, until they feel subjugated. And if you read the Muslim commentaries on how people are to pay the jizya, the dhimmis, the Christians and Jews who are subjugated to Islam, have to come crawling on their knees. The Muslim will grab them by their beards and strike them on the jaw in order to show them their inferior position. This is not me talking. This is not me talking. This is what your sources say. So again, we have to ask ourselves, is this a good moral example? Certainly more we can discuss, but I would say no. Well, I'd like to thank everyone, to thank Sammy. I know I'm a Christian. When someone's criticizing Christianity, it's not always fun, and I know I'm criticizing Muhammad, raising all kinds of objections. I know that's not necessarily fun. So I thank everyone for being patient, for listening to both sides. And as I said in the beginning, I don't think Muhammad was the worst person in history, but this is a debate, so I'm focusing on the things related to the topic. And I think, given what we find, many of you, I know many of you, by the looks on your faces, were disturbed by lots of the things that we find in the Muslim sources. And if you are, you have to think about why that is. If you really believe in Muhammad, you have to wonder why these things are there, whether you agree with them or not. At the end of the day, if you say, I really believe in Muhammad, and I believe Surah 33:21 that Muhammad is the pattern, you have to accept some very interesting things, or you can go against the obvious meaning of the passages. So if you really believe in Muhammad, you have a choice. You can look at Surah 9:29, fight those who do not believe. And you can either say, I'm going to fight those who do not believe, or you can say, I'm going to assume that doesn't mean what it says. I'm going to assume that when the next verse says that it's because these people are Christians and Jews, they're extinguishing the light of Allah later in the passage, that it can't mean that. But where are you getting that meaning? You're not getting that meaning from the text. The text is perfectly clear. In this case, I agree, the text is perfectly clear, as the Quran often says of itself. So if you want to disagree with these passages, if you don't want to apply this pattern to society, what are you saying? Muhammad said, fight those who do not believe, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to reinterpret it. Muhammad said, kill apostates. If anyone leaves Islam, kill him, but I'm not going to interpret it that way. I'm going to reinterpret it. Muhammad said, you can beat your wives into submission if they keep getting out of line. And we have the example of a woman being beaten until her skin turned green, but I'm not going to interpret it that way. But think about this. If you go with your own interpretation every time and you just make these passages mean whatever you want them to mean, are you really adopting the pattern of Muhammad, or are you making Muhammad conform to your pattern and the pattern that you believe in? On the other hand, we have the family issues of Muhammad marrying 9 to 11 wives, Muhammad's relationship with Aisha, Muhammad's relationship with Sauda, Muhammad and his other wives. And do you believe these things are okay? Do you believe that mutta, at least even if you go with Sammy's interpretation and say Muhammad outlawed it, do you believe that these things are okay? Do you believe that if people are used to having sex, you don't tell them, well, now's the time to stop, you're a Muslim? That you give them leeway, as Sammy said Muhammad did for at least a time. These are the questions you have to consider. And when I look at these things, again, I see things in Muhammad's life that are good, and certain things would be good to follow. But I look at these other things and I think these teachings, if they were practiced today, would be disastrous for society. And so I can say that Muhammad is not a good role model for society.